Hello everyone and welcome back. Today, the amazing Insomniak is here to help me with this video. We also have the first part of this collaboration over to his channel. The link is in the description, or wait for it in the end of this video. For today, we prepared for you 9 true scary stories to fuel your nightmares. So grab your flashlight and follow us into the darkness.
I spent my first year as a constable in an inner city suburb of Queensland. Now, of the population of this area, something like 40% was reserved for government commissioned housing for rehabilitated criminals and persons released from mental health centres. So here was a share of the creepy stuff. But to be fair, for the most part, the people we dealt with were more like cartoon characters. So there was this one guy. I met him probably just minutes before he decided to go on his rampage. One afternoon he decided to start destroying everything in his sight at the unit where he lived in. He was really going off on one, kicking through windows, throwing plant pots off the buildings at people going by. I don't know if he's trying to kill them or what. He was stealing people's shoes for some reason, smashing car windows. After about 15 minutes of mayhem, he must have run out of steam and gone back to his unit. That's where we found him, and he decided to bung a turn. He just would not stop screaming and bashing his head and face into any sharp object that he could find. Eventually we got a van with a pod and secured him. Then we went back into the house to try and figure out what the hell had happened. When we get back to the house, it's an absolute mess. Somehow he had fit 2 coal trolleys inside and was using them as furniture. The whole place smelled of rotten food and stuff. On his coffee table, if you could call it that, he had loads of weird scrawled out notes, as well as a wooden box. Inside the wooden box was about 100 small clip seal bags. Over half of the bags had a brown organic material in them, the others had clear crystal stuff in them. He organised the bags from smallest to largest. Now with all the people in the area we had all sorts of wonderful ways that people were getting high. We were used to seeing weird stuff that people would ingest, so we wouldn't recognise these bags, but we got a pretty good idea that it's some kind of narcotic. So of course, we examined these bags and the contents. There is enough there to test if we need to, and I get one of the bags and empty it to see it better. Now there's lots of weird little freckles on these, and there's some weird little hairs on it. It's not unusual for a plant to have, but I've never seen it before. So I'm looking at it and holding it up, talking to my partner, saying that it might be a byproduct of some production of something else. Maybe it's a drug like cats, we're not sure. This might explain why the guy went nuts. A dog unit officer who assisted with the arrest comes in. He sees the scene, looks at the coffee table, looks at the bags and looks at me holding one. He tells me that guy got golden staph. He's been collecting scabs. The guy had been picking at golden staph infection on his leg, collecting them and organising them smallest to largest, ingesting them too. It's the most disturbing thing that I've probably found on all of my time serving.
This happened a long time ago, when I was 4 or 5. It's hard to remember exactly when. I know I was little though, probably around preschool age. Regardless, around this time my family lived in a large old colonial style house. When I say old, I don't intend for you to picture a creepy mansion or a rundown house at the end of the lane. This house was nice, made in 1973, with shag carpet in the basement and wood-panelled walls. Now, around this time, my father was a sales representative and travelled around a lot, most of the week. Our family is small, just myself and my parents. So when this takes place, it was only my mother and I in our house. One night I have gotten lonely, or scared, or bored in the way little children often do, and I went to go sleep in my parents' bed. Once I was warm and comfortable, I was out like a light. You have had those dreams, The ones where everything feels real. There's no foggy feeling, no fantastical scenarios. It's just real. It's solid, and you believe it until you realize something doesn't make sense and the illusion fades. I remember waking up. There was warm yellow sunlight coming in through the blinds. I stretched and twisted over to the other side, where there was a larger shaft of sunshine coming through the open bedroom door and from my father's office directly across the hall and its open window. As I took in the morning sunlight, I noticed something. It looked like a shadow of a man to the right of the doorway of the room across the hall. I halfway got out of bed on my hands when your legs are still under the covers because you don't want to get up yet to get a better angle out of the bedroom door. I moved slowly. I remember slowly shifting my weight to creep past the nightstand by the bed, and I saw the whole thing. Clearly a shadow, but darker and of an even gradient. There were no details as it moved along the wall to the doorframe of the office, and there was no one in the hallway to cast it. Not to mention, the sunlight would have put a shadow on the other side of the hallway. I don't remember feeling scared until I plainly saw its head shift towards me. Before now, it had slowly taken a single step, but as soon as I knew it had turned its head towards me, it streaked away impossibly fast, out of sight, just gone. And that's all I remember. Not the scariest story on this thread, but it's something I've carried around and told a few people when ghost stories come up. What sticks out to me is that this memory has stuck with me so long. I mean, usually dreams fade after a few minutes. I can't remember the details after I've really woken up. But what bothers me most isn't the memory. It's what I don't remember. I don't remember when I realized it was a dream.
So my family owns a cabin on a lake up in New Hampshire. We go there every summer. It's basically our home away from home. There's other homes up on the lake, quite a few near us, but beyond that, it's a rural area. There's miles of woods stretching beyond the lake and houses, so there's really no reason to be in the area unless you were hunting, own a lake, or were visiting the lake for whatever reason. So one night, maybe 6 years ago, so it was late at night, my girlfriend and I were laying in bed chatting to each other when all of a sudden, we hear footsteps outside of the open window. The window lays open only about halfway up on the wall on the other side of the bed, and is situated so that it opens right at the bottom of the bed where our feet are. The ground around my home is covered in layers of pine needles that drop from above. It's very hard to walk upon quietly, but the footsteps sounded like whatever was making them was trying their best not to be heard. They sounded relatively close, but we rationalized to ourselves that they probably were being made from some kind of animal. A few minutes go by and we hear them again, except this time they seem closer. They seem to be right outside of the window, still trying to move quiet. At this point, the two of us are starting to get freaked out. To our horror, we then look down and see a hand slowly coming through the window. Of course, we scream and wake up the home. My parents come running out to their adjacent room. We tell them what happened. My father rationalizes that it was a figure of our imagination, but it's very obvious that it wasn't. Both of us saw the same thing at the same time. I'm still not sure what happened to this day.
A little background before I unravel this horror story that is unfortunately true. First, I am a police officer for the city I live in. I am including this detail because it plays a small part later in the story. Second, this happened last month, July 2016, so I am pretty sure I will remember the details pretty accurately, not to mention that I practice depicting details of incidents every day, multiple times on paper 5 days a week. Anyway, 20 minutes pass and I am already on the fishing dock in my chair, listening to the cutting silence. No wind, no anything. I prefer it that way anyway, mostly because I have become a little paranoid being out at night all the time. You see some crazy stuff in the city at night when you're a police officer. It's very silent, the kind where you can hear the humming sound of the silence, if you know what I mean. But then there was a crack, as if someone was walking up. I turned around and flicked on my headlamp. I was calm at this point. I figured it might be a rabbit or something, or maybe a small owl. To my surprise, it was the guy I had seen earlier. He seemed blank. He just looked at me and I looked at him. So I tell him, "Hey there, beautiful night, isn't it?" Trying not to sound like a completely moron. The stranger said, yes." He paused before he said that, almost like he could not speak. He had something weird to his voice, like he had a speech impediment or something. His voice sounded like a fucking nail on a chalkboard, scratchy, plus he stuttered before his words. It gave me the nastiest feeling, chills down my spine. One word and I was afraid of him. I deal with sex offenders, domestic violence and drug dealers daily, and this guy had me feeling this way after one word. Me. "Did you come out here to throw some line too?" This time he did not answer me. He started to shake, almost like he was about to have a seizure, except he was still staring right at me. And now he was making a straining noise with his throat, like he was growling. Fucking growling. A human, a grown man growling at me in a truly disturbing tone, 6 miles from the nearest house, alone. My first instinct is to identify myself. I grabbed my credentials from my back pocket as I started to grab my tackle and chair. I put everything where I could pretty much pick up and go. But as I look up, he is still doing it, still making that noise. I took off headlamp and pointed at credentials. "Please, sir, keep calm and keep your hands visible to me." He would not stop. He only got louder. The thought that should be going through your head right now is exactly what was going through mine. What the fuck or what the fuck do I do now? I moved my light from the hand it was into the hand with the credentials in it and reached for my concealed carry weapon. Call me a hothead, but honestly, what would you do? I am concerned here. He's standing right by the only walkway off the dock, not to mention the only way to my truck. Right as I pulled it from my holster, this guy lets out a screech. Not a scream, a screech. I can say that is very close to the loudest thing I have ever heard, with complete certainty. I jumped. Honestly, it was not expected at all. I get my light and weapon back on target, or at least where he was. I could hear brush and rocks moving. It seemed as if the noise was everywhere. I'd hear it here or over there. I decided to run to the truck. I didn't pick up anything. I just ran. More noises are coming from behind me at this point. I dove in the truck and got out of Dodge. That's all what happened. That drive back home was quite a train of thoughts. I have never been out fishing alone since.
In my town is a stretch of road down a valley along a river. It's a gorgeous drive, probably only 15 miles, until it dead ends at a nature centre and there's lots of trails to hike. And people spend a whole weekend camping out there at a time, fishing and hunting. Call service does cut off about halfway there though, but I drive that road all the time. It's a good drive to take while my infant naps in the car. My toddler likes to look for all kinds of wildlife along the way. There are a few houses along the way, mostly tucked up the side of a mountain hidden in the trees, but we usually pass a few people along the road out for a jog or walking the dog. So one morning, the baby falls asleep in the car, so we take a drive to the nature centre and back, looking for a moose or an eagle. It's about -6 Fahrenheit. The roads are kind of icy but not too bad. When we get to the dead end, we turn around and head back towards town. When about a mile down the road, I see 2 people walking along the shoulder. Not unusual. It's a pretty morning, but as I get closer, one of them jumps out into the middle of the road frantically waving me down. I slam on the brakes. Because of where she is standing, I very nearly slammed into her. I finally managed to stop. Now the way she flagged me down, I thought one of them had maybe gotten hurt, with no cell service or anything. I then opened my window a little bit, and 2 of them ran up to the car. The guy hung back, just behind my blind spot, which immediately made me nervous. I couldn't get a look at him. Red flag number 1. But the lady come up to my cracked window and said that their car had broken down and they desperately needed a ride. Now I hadn't passed another car along the road. That was a second red flag. I explained that I had my kid in the car, so I had no room, nor was I comfortable having strangers with my kid. This just made her angry. I offered to call them a cab or an Uber, but she refused both of them. Then she just started trying to open my car door, which thankfully was still locked. The guy behind my car started yelling and cursing at me. I just said sorry and drove off. As soon as I drove far enough to get a signal, I called the non-emergency police line to let them know about the stranded hitchhikers. Turns out, the police were looking for them because one of the homeowners along that road had found them sleeping in his car. They were trying to get back into town to disappear before the cops found them. The cops never found them though. I kind of brushed it off. That's until a week later while watching the news. They're on a feature story because they're a husband and wife. The husband murdered the wife and tried to frame it as if she'd just fallen and tripped down the stairs. There's no doubt in my mind that if I let them into my car, they would have successfully forced their way in and would have killed me too.
Summer of 2004. My family was supposed to vacation in Kennebunkport, Maine. My father was stuck in meetings, so he was going to come up from Manhattan a few days after us. My mom wanted to drive up, super annoying to me at the time, but we didn't have a choice, and my brother, sister and I loaded into the car and started the drive. I was about 14 at the time. Drive was uneventful, but there were various delays and we ended up getting in a lot later than originally planned. Because of this, the owners of the house we were renting had turned in for the night and we weren't able to get a hold of them to get the keys. Sounds like horrible planning, but apparently they were pretty strict about the time frame to pick up the keys. My mom decided she wanted lobster, so we went to one of our favorite spots. She called my dad to see if he would make us reservations at a hotel in Kennebunkport from New York City while we ate. We were enjoying the lobster while a guy came up and started chatting with my mom. I figured it was just a friendly local making conversation. During this, My dad calls my mom, and my mom excuses herself to speak to him. Apparently, all hotels were booked for the night. Go figure. Height of vacation season in Kennebunkport. The plan was for us to drive to the nearest town and just find somewhere to stay until we could pick up the keys for our vacation home. Apparently the local had been listening into my mom's conversation and came back over once she got off the phone. I want to say there was nothing outwardly off about him. He was preppy, clean-cut, unassuming, and fit in with the clientele. He told my mom he had a big home with a big guest house we were more than welcome to stay at, and his wife wouldn't mind. Immediately, my reaction was, fuck that. No way in the world I was staying in a random dude's house in creepy Maine in the dark. No offense to anyone from Maine, but the streets get creepy. My mom, doing her due diligence, determined this guy was legit. Said he was in finance, my mom was an investment banker, and they chatted enough for my mom to determine he wasn't totally full of it. I called my dad hysterical. He said I was overreacting and that I needed to get out of the city more and accept that sometimes people are just nice. So, my brother, sister and I got into our car and followed him back to his house. The guest house was really nice, fully furnished, but the beds were oddly placed. The guest house had 2 bedrooms, and instead of the beds being located in the middle centered, imagine a symmetrical room layout, they were right under the window in each room. Just seemed out of place. Anyway, fast forward. We are all getting ready to go to bed. My mom hears a knock on the door, and it's the guy. He said he just wanted to check to make sure we got settled. Cool, nice thing to do. About 30 minutes later, he comes back to check in again. At this point, my mom was like, "Thanks, we're good. We will stop by the house in the morning to say thank you," etc. Fast forward another 30 to 45 minutes. I can't sleep. I'm terrified. We hear this rustling, which is odd because the guest house was nowhere around trees or close proximity to bushes that might cause such a noise. At this point, I see my mom wide awake and look up at the window, like motioning towards the window with her eyes. Let me add, none of the windows had curtains. The guy said it's because his wife was in the process of redecorating. When I looked up, there was a male figure just standing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I don't know how long he was there for. When he walked away, my mom waited a bit and then he told us to get our stuff together. She wasn't messing around. We had my dad on the phone at this point. He was pretty much flipping out at my mom about something, but I didn't hear what. My mom said she was going to put stuff in the car and to follow her out. This was around 2 a.m. When we got into the car, we pulled around to the front of the main house so my mom could return the key and say thanks and get the fuck out of there. However, when we got to the front, all of the lights were off. Not just all lights, but it looked like no one had been home. Porch light, table lamp in front windows, everything black. Also the 2 cars were gone, the local's car and what we presumed to be his wife's car. After seeing this, my mom at this point, pretty unsettled, said we were leaving and we proceeded to drive to the gate. The gate at the end of the driveway had been dead bolted, padlocked shut from the inside. It wasn't a super strong gate, so my dad said rev it. We were in a big SUV, and just get out of there. We drove straight back to New York City, not speaking the entire time. We have never returned back to Maine, and my parents refused to speak about it. I asked a family member one night about it when he was drunk, and all he said is, "They didn't tell you?" The actual owners of the house were on vacation. I'm assuming my mom or dad followed up with local authorities and figured that out, but never told us. I don't know who that man was or what was planned that evening. I was curious as to whether there were any known serial killers or murderers who were in the area at the time, whether traveling through.
This happened to me when I was about 13. So me and my grandparents were extremely close and had been through all kinds of things together. So my grandfather is outdoorsy, the kind of person to say get off your phone and get outside. And he pitched the idea to go camping in early August 2017. I was kind of excited because I don't really get outside as much as I should, and I loved the idea of spending some time with him. That being said, we weren't going true camping. He wanted to go into the woods I told him about with a nearby campground that we could go to. He was still thrilled, so we embarked on our weekend journey. Just let me paint you a picture. Our campsite was a dead end aside from the one side to ours. It was right near the lake. It was beautiful, but to our dismay, we had people right beside us. We did all the camping things, made fire, swimming, even telling each other spooky stories around the campfire. So we hit the sack at about 10 PM because there was not much else to do. As soon as my head hit the pillow, it started. The crunching sounds of leaves around our campsite. We didn't think anything of it at the time because the night was young. Some idiots were setting off fireworks anyway. Hell, even our neighbours were still laughing. I fell asleep. 11 PM is when it started to get weird. The party was still on, but our neighbours shut up. So the crunching of the leaves didn't make any sense. It was consistent, so my guess is that the noises were footsteps. No one needed to be on our campsite, especially not at night. It didn't make sense. My grandpa was very on edge at the time too. We're both feeling very paranoid. I then wake up again and check my watch. It's 12 AM. It started raining. The water is splashing against the rocks and the thunder in the distance is quite loud. Even with the sounds of rain on the side of the tent, you can still hear the footsteps and whatnot. The unsettling nature of the situation starts to eat away at me. I wasn't scared, just creeped out. Sleep overcome me though it didn't come easy. Now a crack of thunder did eventually awake me again. There was a full-blown thunderstorm now. I felt relieved as I thought the footsteps stopped, until I heard the thump of wood. I didn't know how the person did it, but it was very hard and loud, and they were two very distinct knocks, followed by two large splashes. God, this is terrifying. That's my only thought as the footsteps continued. I stayed there still for about 2 hours. 5 AM now. Daybreak is near, though my heart nearly exploded when I heard somebody trying the zipper to the tent. I then saw the outline of 3 fingers being dragged across the tent. My body shut down as they come closer and stepped towards the fabric. They brushed against my head. Now every nerve in my body told me to scream, but I didn't. I was terrified. The hand trailed away and eventually became quieter and quieter. I went to investigate. The ground was turned up from the mudstorm, but there was lots of boot prints everywhere. Easy to say that we dipped the hell out of there after that. After that nothing come of it, but we never went out again camping since. Can you just imagine knowing that somebody's walked in circles around your campsite for 8 hours straight?
When I was about 13, my parents and I moved to an old house. It was at least 19 years old. It was large and it was in pretty good condition for a house that old. I was an only child. I got the second biggest room on the second floor, and that room was huge. Sometimes my parents left me at home by myself for a few hours. I was always asked to stay at home. I didn't mind staying at home because I like to think of myself as responsible and trustworthy. It made me feel special. One night, at around 6 p.m. or so, my parents had to go run some errands. They were the kind of people who spent long hours out shopping for the best deals, and they used a lot of coupons on whatever they could. And I did not want to be involved in this at all, so I decided not to come. I stayed in my room and watched some TV. Then, at around 8 p.m., I got hungry and decided to get a snack. Now, at this point the house is very dark, so I grab my cell phone and use it as best as I can to light up the hallway, since the hallway didn't have a light. Now, this is before cell phones had built-in flashlights, so I just used all the light my screen could give until I made it to the kitchen. The kitchen light had been left on by my parents. I put my phone on the counter. As I was walking to the pantry, I saw a man hunched down in the corner by the back door. He was wearing black and red clothing, and he had long, greasy, unkempt hair. I didn't see his face. He was holding a large knife. He didn't notice that I had spotted him. I wanted to scream, but I used my hand to cover my mouth and walked back upstairs, leaving my cell phone down there. I was not walking over to get it. We didn't have any phones upstairs, so I walked into my room, locked the door, and I hid in my closet. I start crying silently and start thinking the worst. He was going to find me and kill me. I just knew it. Then I heard someone coming up the stairs. Heavy footsteps. I felt sick, and I had never been so afraid in my life. Then I heard someone open the door to my parents' room, which was 2 rooms away from mine. I then hear police sirens outside, and I hear the door being knocked on. I breathe a sigh of relief. I hear the man running back down the stairs quickly, and he's trying to open our back door. Then I hear our front door being pushed down, and I heard footsteps of 2 people coming upstairs, and they start searching our home. The police come to my room and let me know it's safe. I opened the door. I later found out that our neighbors saw this man unlocking our back door with a key and saw that he had a knife and called the police. My parents arrived a few minutes later, and my mom started hugging me and crying. The man unfortunately escaped. I cried and cried, and I got no sleep that night, because the man had a key which changed the lock, but we eventually moved way out of state. I'm 23 now. I have moved past it, but there are several questions I still have. How did he get a key? Why did he want to come to our house? And what would he have done if the police showed up any later? Hey there, and thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to check Insomniak, who produces amazing content, and also follow him over to his channel for the first part of this collaboration. And because you're amazing, I know that you will like and comment this video. Until the next one, take care and I will see you all in my next video.